The Business of Agriculture is brought to you by Land Trust. Have you heard how landowners are increasing profitability by adding recreation to their portfolio of land use? Millions of outdoor recreators seek wide-open spaces for birdwatching, photography, hunting, fishing, horseback riding, and many other farm and ranch activities. Landowners are partnering with the Recreation Access Network, Land Trust. Land Trust is an online platform connecting recreators with landowners for outdoor experiences on their land to increase profitability. Visit landtrust.com/BOA, as in Business of Agriculture, to learn more. That's landtrust.com/BOA.
Well, greetings and welcome to another fantastic episode of the Business of Agriculture podcast. It's me, your host, Damian Mason, but you already knew that because you heard that in the introduction. Got a great show for you today because we've got a returning guest, my buddy. We're going to have a drink after this, so you know what? We're not going to waste your time. His name is Rob Saik. He's Ukrainian from Alberta, and he's also a sometimes American here in my adopted state of Arizona. He, like me, get away from the cold when we can. He was in Arizona, Glendale, Arizona, in fact, today and yesterday for the Vision Conference, a higher-end conference looking at the future of the business of agriculture. So I want to pick his brain, which I hate that term. You know what? When someone says, I want to pick your brain, vultures pick the brains out of dead roadkill. So I'm not really going to pick his brain. We're going to talk about the highlights from the conference that he just attended, looking at all things future of the world's most important industry. Rob Saik, if you are new to listening and viewing my program, has been on here multiple times. He is the CEO and founder of AgVisorPro, with the tagline, Connecting Agriculture to its experts. AgVisorPro is a company he started a couple of years ago. He has been involved in like 17 different companies throughout his entrepreneurial career, so I call him an ag entrepreneur. He's also the author of Food 5.0. I quoted and gave him a testimonial for that very book, which is over on my shelf as we speak. Anyway, Rob Saik, thanks for being here at the Business of Agriculture.
Well, it's great to be here with you, Damian. For the people on the podcast, you can't see, but Damian is quite pale. I'm tanned up a little bit better than he is, but it's great to be in Arizona.
Could it be that I've been spending too much time in places like Yakima or Columbus, Ohio,
and airplanes.
or airplanes? Yeah. So anyway, it is that busy season. We're recording this in January, dear listener. Also, dear listener, if you're a listener, we thank you. But we also have this on YouTube. I do release all of the videos so you can watch as well as see what we're talking about. But in any case, I'm glad you're here, and I do encourage you to share this with other people you know, both in and outside of the business of
share
agriculture.
this. This would be good. This would be good to share.
This will be a good one to share. All right, so you went to this Vision Conference. You're always forward-looking. It's one of the things I really like about hanging out with you is because you challenge me to think, and I'm a forward-looking guy about where things are going, trends, demographics. I'm always about trends and demographics in the marketplace, and I'm less along the technology. You always challenge me because you're along the technology side.
On the technology front.
So you want to lead off with that. One of the big takeaways from the Vision Conference, you said Kubota, John Deere, and Case IH had their North American representative on the stage for a panel talking about, I believe it was...
Well, they were talking about the integration of data through machinery and also automation, so we're going to touch on that. And the Visions Conference was organized by Meister Media and attended by about 110 folks, pretty high-end, pretty high-level folks at the conference, and a real good agenda. So it was a really, really wide-ranging agenda.
Yeah, so the folks that come to this are not farmers. They are industry people or even outside the industry people wanting to know where this business goes. Am I right?
Yeah, you got that. But there were farmers, and I just wrapped up a conversation with a guy from around Yakima, Washington, actually. He showed up there. So there were farmers in the audience, but typically this would be people that are driving data, driving sensors, satellite companies, that sort of thing, a lot of equipment and robotics, and a lot of demographics, too, looking at consumer behavior and also where farmers are going to be going.
All right, well, you want to tell me which thing you want to lead off with. We're we said we really liked the idea about technology, about carbon, about marketplace demographics. Which thing do you want to go with
Well,
first?
let's start talking about the whole area of sustainability and what does that mean, and can we have farming get compensated for doing something quote unquote more sustainably. And so the listeners wouldn't know this, but back in 2007, I founded a company called AgriTrend Aggregation. And in the province of Alberta, there's legislated greenhouse gas emission reductions in the province, only jurisdiction in North America. And we created agricultural offsets to the tune of $50 million. And so there's more and more people interested in what that means for the farming community. How does that all fit in? And what's really important to me is, can it lead to difference in practice on farms?
Okay, and you'll know because you keep up with me, and I'll give you my initial response to this. First off, it was a decade ago, 5 years ago, sustainability became the new the buzz phrase. And I pointed out, ask 100 different consumers to define sustainability, and you'll absolutely get 100 different answers. It's difficult to certainly define, and also to some consumers it means small farms, it means local, it means organic, it means now the buzzword regenerative, which we're not going to talk about. It means a lot of different stuff to a lot of different people, but to you and I it means producing a crop, caloric consumption for the humans, using less energy than it took to produce it. Ultimately would be what we're trying to do. In other words, we can't be burning through so much energy to produce human digestible energy to where we're depleting the earth. And so my thing would be, let's look at big picture, not about small, local, organic, all that kind of buzzword crap that they use at Whole Foods. It's really about, can we do this indefinitely?
Well, what's really interesting is the number of metrics and the number of points that are coming together to start developing sustainability indexes. And so one of the closing speakers just commented, she said they're doing an assessment of where foods comes from and ingredients. And she says, when you look at the overall greenhouse gas footprint of the ingredients going into food or into the grocery store, only 10% is actually attributed to transportation. So this whole notion that you buy local and you reduce greenhouse gas emissions may not be as accurate as what people think. And I like the fact that they're starting to put numbers to it.
Yeah, it's hard to quantify, but you're saying that one of the speakers there pointed out that, we can say, it's bad to bring kumquats from New Zealand to the United States of America because we're traversing them all across the Pacific Ocean and putting them on a truck in California and shipping them to...
I don't have any idea what a kumquat is.
Okay. Kiwi fruit. Name it whatever it is. Name some sort of bizarre, foreign-sounding fruit. You're saying that only 10% of that, on average, comes from transportation.
Yeah, so, the whole idea here that you could dramatically reduce the greenhouse gas footprint of the products you're buying in the grocery store by buying them just because they're grown locally. That may not be the biggest factor because there's a whole bunch of other things that go into it. Water use efficiency, how much diesel fuel you're burning in that operation, what are the inputs that are going on. And I always argue this thing, when you consider greenhouse gases, for example, tillage releases a lot of carbon dioxide and nitrous oxide from soil the more you till. Yeah. So, one of those contrasting things which she was pointing out, which is going to be really cool, is whether or not you could assess 5 or 6 passes to control weeds versus one spray with glyphosate.
Yeah, well, that gets into the thing of that you and I both say there are times chemistry certainly is better for the environment than 9 trips across the
Well, this
field
will be
with
really interesting
diesel.
Because if a consumer starts to look at the sustainability index, and the sustainability index is based on all the metrics, not just whether a spray is used or not, but you're looking at the impact of tillage, then all of a sudden I think the consumer is starting to wake up to this thing. I think the consumer is getting a little tired of non-GMO labels on water.
Yeah, right. Well, they do a little bit too much of that. So let's talk about then the idea of sustainability beyond that about carbon. Carbon is the Wild West right now. I've had people on my podcast talk about carbon. You and I have read the articles. There's companies that say they're going to pay you for your carbon. I still don't know hardly anybody that's making money on carbon. I know one guy with Extreme Ag, my other side affiliation, and in fact, that's how we met because he sold carbon credits. Nobody's approached me as a acreage owner in Indiana and said, we would like to do a carbon program with you.
Well, the carbon credits that we aggregated in Alberta were built around activity or lack of activity. So as farmers moved towards minimum and zero tillage, we were able to ascertain that less passes over the field meant that there was more carbon moving into the soil. But it wasn't a measurement. It was an activity-based protocol. Now, when you consider that people are saying we can measure carbon, I challenge that thinking, because if you put 10 soil scientists in the room and say, go and give me a carbon measurement, you'll have 10 arguments. So there is no consensus on how you measure carbon. However, Damian, we can measure the fact.
You mean the sequestration?
The sequestration.
Because I also have said,
Yeah.
wait a minute, you tell me, well, that field's in alfalfa, Damian, and behind your house in Indiana. And so we know that in these type of soils, in this climatological zone where we get 38 inches of precipitation, it's 2.5 tons of carbon that alfalfa can sequester. I'm like, what if I cut it 6 times versus 3 times and I have new growth? Does it change the sequestration? What if we have a dry spell versus a wet year? It's going to change the growth pattern, which then would dictate or change the carbon demand on the plant.
Well, I think farmers recognize the fact that quantifying carbon or measuring carbon in soil through measurements or soil testing. You know the vagaries of soil testing. However, one of the things that is coming out is we can document farmers reducing nitrous oxide emissions by using nitrogen stabilizers. We can document farmers reducing nitrous oxide by split applying nitrogen.
Now
so there are activities that it can do that we can quantify. Those are quantifiable.
They are quantifiable because what we're really talking about there is release. In other words, most nitrogen is lost, correct me if I'm wrong, you try and put it into the ground and it escapes before it even gets to where it can do any good.
Well, that's not exactly true, because nitrogen by its nature is picked up by the plant in the nitrate form or in the ammoniacal form. Now, we can lose nitrate to rainfall. 38 inches of rain? Shit, that's like 4 years of rainfall where I come from. Anyway, the nitrate can be leached down, or it can be volatilized if it's a drowned out area. It can go up, and the problem with nitrate is 300 times more greenhouse gassing than carbon dioxide. So if farmers can prove that their activity is reducing nitrate or reducing methane, then that's something you can quantify and you should be able to get paid for.
But you're not getting paid for that. We're not even paying for carbon, and we've been talking about that for several years now. We're still not getting I don't know people getting carbon payments in mass. So if we're not even paying for the carbon, we've been talking about that forever. We're a long way away from nitrogen volatilization recapture payments.
I think that may actually be easier to sell, to package up and do nitrate reduction offsets.
I don't disagree that it's more easily quantifiable, but it's also not in the common vernacular. The average consumer, even the person that watches the Today Show, that's not certainly dialed into the economics of agriculture or scientifically dialed into food production, has heard about carbon, climate change. The political aspect of being paid for carbon makes it more digestible.
Well, the very well-educated consumer watching the Today Show probably doesn't know the difference between carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrous oxide. However, from a standpoint of greenhouse gassing, if agriculture can reduce methane and reduce nitrous oxide through activity by doing things better, I think that kind of aligns with agronomics and output-based agriculture. And to me, it's encouraging that we're actually seeing that. And I think, Damian, that we need to change the vernacular around carbon to offsets. I think if we create offsets,
just call it offsets.
Yeah.
So
take the concrete industry. People don't think about the cement industry, but it is a huge emitter of greenhouse gases,
right.
and it's really difficult for them to reduce it.
Yeah.
So they need to buy those offsets. And if farmers can start using slow release nitrogen, doing split nitrogen, doing nitrogen at different rates, doing things better.
Obviously, cover crops is the one we talk about a lot, because now we've got something that's actually growing more days of the year and pulling the carbon dioxide out of the air. But I think you're having a hard time. I think at a techie conference like this, them talking about things like nitrogen and an offset is more palatable or comprehensible than it would be among the political movements that happen in places like Ottawa or Washington, D.C.
So
on
I want
carbon.
to talk to you a little bit about
and I was willing,
reduction of methane from cattle.
And I was willing to, by the way, I was willing to go ahead and insult the Ottawa, but let's face it, when you're an American, you can't insult the politics of Ottawa when you're an American.
Well, you could take a shot at it. I don't think you can make fun of our leader Trudeau. Can you? Of course you can. Yeah.
Okay, so
right,
but
hey, listen.
Trudeau has his issues, but he does know what day it is. We can't say that about our leader.
I want to talk to you about cattle.
All right.
So cattle are being vilified right now because everybody says cattle is associated with lots of
methane. Those cow
farts.
farts.
But there are things we can do in feedlot operations. There's things we can do to reduce the days on feed or reduce the amount of methane through additions, and that is quantifiable. Did you know we're actually transacting that right now in Canada?
You're paying producers, say, in feed yards in Alberta to reduce days on feed or to reduce
days on feed, or do a change in operation where they're integrating some additives to reduce the amount of methane coming out of cattle. That's quantifiable, and it's being sold as offsets.
Okay, so a company somewhere, let's call it the electric generation industry, that they have a lot of carbon
offset. Large final emitter.
They'll say, I'm going to give $1 million or $10 million to somebody to do something positive because I'm out here emitting this stuff. They're going to give money to a feed yard in Alberta to say, if you feed this ration, cut back days on feed and do some other stuff to reduce methane. And then it's supposed to be verified by...
Yeah, so this is another thing that was at the conference, but in Alberta where we worked, there was a registration, so you would serialize the offsets. They were registered, and then you could transact, and they would be verified and even audited. So there's a good audit trail, but this is something like Trimble Agriculture now is the company that bought my company, and they're the ones doing the cattle offsets, and I think that's...
when you say they're doing it, are they being the verification, or are they being we've got the money from Pacific Gas and Electric and we're going to pay it to you for doing this practice? What is their role? What is their role?
Trimble Aggregation would pull together all the data. So their job is to work with the feedlots, pull together the data, submit the data into the registries, handle the whole, and then get the transaction done, and then feed the money back into the farmer's pocket. Now, you're going to ask me how much is the farmer getting, and I'm going from memory here, but I think it's around $1.50 to $3 a head, I think, and that would have to be verified by somebody who knows more.
Okay,
about that.
So is that for the entire lifespan? So I've got this steer on feed for 5.5 months in my feed yard, and I just actually lengthened. I just changed a lot of my practices to make $1.50. Am I going to do that?
Yeah, again, I don't hold me to the number. It could be better than that, and I do need to apologize because I don't have the number on top.
Well, you just attended 2 or 3 days of conference, and let's face it, at your age, you can't remember everything.
But
so
the point is, there were times when farmers are making $5 a head, $20 a head. So when you talk about knocking another $3 on there, that's significant in terms of the overall margin out of a feedlot. And it is feedlot generated.
Yeah, and feedlots obviously work on historically low margins. Yeah. Let's talk about then the average landowner, somebody like me. Do I get money for practices, do you think, on these offsets in the next 5 years? Because, I've been hearing a lot about it. Nobody's approached me. Now, granted, I can say I'm not the operator. But either way, me or my operator, my tenant, somebody should be getting money on this. Is that going to happen in the next 2 to 5 years?
I think it'll happen in the next 2 to 5 years. I think the one big question mark in the whole thing is people that are running around and saying we can measure carbon in soil and we'll measure the delta between this year and 5 years from now and package that up and sell that. That's the big question mark for me. In terms of activity-based or reduction of greenhouse gases off the farm, I think that's quantifiable. I think that will be transactable in the next 3 to 5 years.
And then it's going to be from, I've heard about Microsoft giving, $500 million to TrueTerra or something like that. Is that what's going to take? Is these companies just voluntarily going to start ponying up dollars so they can go?
As opposed to Alberta, which was a regulated market, so the large final emitters like the cement companies or electric companies had to reduce or remove or pay off by offsets. The voluntary market will take the drivers of the likes of Microsoft. And once Microsoft adopts they verify that I like these kind of offsets,
right.
that'll start to generate the market.
Except that it's still a voluntary thing, and
But let's face it, all these big companies want to look like they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
So if they can say we've neutralized the carbon, that's where.
Wall Street Journal yesterday had an article about the peril, if you will, of ESG, environmental, social, and governance standards. They all want to have standards and mandates. And they want to tell their shareholders that they're all doing these things, but it's again quantifiable.
I think a lot of companies can't get there without agriculture, because I don't think agriculture globally is a huge pool. People say agriculture is greenhouse gas part of the problem. It is also one of the industries that can be part of the solution.
Well, because we control a lot of acres, and we also can do things on those acres. The rainforest is neat, but you can't change the practices on a rainforest other than to stop bulldozing it. You can change the practices on an acre of farmland pretty drastically in terms of what it can do for the environment.
And as an agronomist, I look at a lot of the things that we're talking about doing that farmers can quantify on their operation, and making these small changes can move them into a position where they eventually could generate these offsets. And generally, these practices are good practices. Yeah. It's not like you're asking them to do stupid stuff. It's good stuff.
Right. Yeah. There was a time when, you were getting paid by somebody to go out and rape your property, and now you're talking about things that generally should be good for it.
Well, in Canada, for example, province of Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan farmers have been doing no-till for 30 years.
Yeah.
And Alberta, it's been 25 years. Mm-hmm. There's lots of areas in the United States of America that could be doing more no-till, and they're not.
Yeah, and that's a pretty easy fix. Yeah. Technology, since you're a tech guy, and equipment, we can tell our listeners, you had a brief stint with DOT, a company that was sold to Raven, autonomous machinery. You and I both believe that machinery is going to become autonomous. I also tell my audiences machinery is going to become smaller. It's gotten very large. It doesn't fit down the county roads. It breaks down these bridges in places like where I'm from in Indiana, because they were built in the 1950s. It's tremendously expensive. It squishes the soil. It seems to me that machinery is going to get smaller and autonomous, and obviously more technologically coordinated.
Yeah, I served as CEO of DOT Technology Corporation, which was a U-shaped platform, and we transacted with Raven, and subsequently Raven transacted with CNH. So that whole autonomous family that we were working in is now part of the CNH family. And to your point, exactly right. But the real pinch point that we're seeing across the board is labor. And the reality is that you just can't find people. Now, at the conference here, one of the robotic companies that was on stage with me was Gus, and Gus is out of California. And Gus is a robotic robotic sprayer that goes up and down the walnut groves and the groves to spray.
So Gus isn't a guy. Gus is a piece of autonomous machinery.
Gus is a piece of autonomous equipment. We have 121 of them working now, and it's really hard to get people to drive a sprayer in orchards at night with the chemical and everything, and they just deploy these things now.
So they're being used in orchards on the West Coast.
Yes.
Because obviously tree products do get a lot of treatments. And
Absolutely.
so, we talk about spraying a soybean crop maybe, 4 times or something.
Yeah, but you got a whole cycle of insects and diseases that go to these tree crops.
So these tree crops get a lot, and so also they are very uniform. I mean, those trees are planted on, 20-foot centers or something like this.
There's not a lot of movement. I mean, they're there for a long time.
They're there for 100 years. So we've got an autonomous machine that you saw or heard about and was explained to you at this conference, the Vision conference we're talking about, that goes up and down those, and it's generally only used to apply pesticides and herbicides and
or foliar
fertilizers.
Fertilizers.
Oh, right.
Sure, you could do that. And then another one of the technologies was out of Europe, and it was a company called NIO, N-A-I-O, and NIO has got these small footprint, lighter robots, and they go along, and this is really interesting. They map out every plant that's in the field. So they're using vegetable plants. They map out the plants, and then NIO will move along, knowing where those plants are, and can completely mechanically mechanically weed out without knocking out the plants. So it knows precisely where the plants are. We're talking sub-inch accuracy here, sub-half-inch accuracy.
And what's the platform of that machine?
That
drives, flies?
It drives, and it would do about maybe 8 or 10 rows of vegetables. It goes up and down, and it just weeds these vegetables without any herbicide.
And it plucks them, mows them?
It just uses scuffling, like a scuffling wheel.
A mini tiller.
Yep.
A little mini tiller. Yep. And what's the machine? Its size is that of what 20 feet wide, 10 feet wide or something?
Yeah, it'd be about 10 feet wide, and it's shorter than the height of man. And
is it being used now?
Yeah, they're deploying them right now.
And you said
that technology is referred to as swarm technology because they can put several in the field working. And the nice part about this, once you get them set up, they can work day or night. They don't care.
Right. So autonomous machines, they don't even need to be owned. In other words, you could be a contractor that brings them out, like we talk about. Contract harvesters that work their way from Texas all the way up to the prairie provinces harvesting. So we could do that. These gusses that you talked about in these orchards, who owns them?
Well, this is really interesting. At first, it was robotics as a service.
Yeah.
So the farmers would said, come and run these robots up and down. And after a while, the farmers learned that, hey, this was not that hard to run. And one person sitting in a pickup truck could run 8 of these things at one time. And so the farmers say, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to teach my people how to do this.
Yeah.
And so we're seeing a brand new career unfold at farm level, which I refer to, Damian, as the farm technology integrator. Somebody has to make all of this stuff work. It's a brand new position emerging on the farm, and it's very, very exciting.
I see this happening also. I've spoken to a number of conferences that are aerial applicators, and one of the aerial applicator groups that I spoke at here last year said we're going to see crop duster pilots. We're taking a guy or a gal, generally it's a guy, and putting him in a cockpit of a little plane that's the size of a Volkswagen,
most dangerous,
and loading it down with pesticides, and then he's going out there and flying 125 miles an hour over these fields, and then trying to not hit trees and power lines. Drone technology is already probably there to replace and supplant that.
Another company that was in attendance there was a company called Radzino, and Radzino is out of it's out of Iowa, and one of the things that they're working on there is they're working on catch and release. So the drone would release with, I think they said they can spray up to 2.5 gallons an acre, which is actually pretty significant for fungicide coverage.
Yeah, because it's not going to be stuff that you have to have a bunch of carrying capacity. We can't take 500 gallons on these.
The catch and release, they keep coming back and reloading and going back out. But you couple that with swarm technology, where you could have 3 or 4 or 5 of these things running on a field, or more interestingly, if you could document from satellite imagery where you're likely to have a disease problem, then what you do is you deploy the drones, the aerial drones, to deal with that problem.
Only on the acres that need treated, and that day is coming where we say we don't need to treat even all 43,560 square feet of the acre. The problem is over on these 4,000 feet of that acre.
And globally, if you consider, Damian, where agriculture is done on terraces and really, really uneven land, like in Japan and like in some areas of China, but Japan in particular, a significant amount of the herbicide or the pesticide crop protection products are being applied by drones.
Okay, because they obviously have small, odd-shaped acreages. Okay, so let's talk about, we did technology, we did sustainability and carbon. There was another category of things that you talked about, the takeaways from the Vision Conference. And in case you're forgetting, by the way, he was at the Vision Conference. Big conference.
I think the one thing that I took away from, I was just in Portugal not too long ago speaking at a conference, and they have this whole European Union called Farm to Fork, where the European Union is mandating a 50% reduction in pesticides, a 25% reduction, 20% reduction in fertilizer, and mandating that 25% of the land in Europe will be organic by 2030, and a 50% reduction in antibiotic use in animals.
8 years.
And I could use the word farm to F something else, but I think the policy isn't that great. But what I heard at the conference here, winding up, was really fork to farm, and the fact that in agriculture we're going to have to listen to the consumer more, because the consumer is going to tell us what we need to do on the farm. Like it or not, they are going to be the tail that wags the dog.
There's they're more than the tail. Let's face it, they're 99% or 93%. I mean, in the United States, 7% of us work in that business of ag, peripherally, total. So they're the bulk of the people, and the truth is, you and I both say that a lot of our ag people don't like it. And I always tell my audience is, when you say educate the consumer, what you usually mean is tell them why you do what you do so you can just keep doing it. And that's not really educating anybody. Plus, I'm not sure the consumer cares to be educated. We got two big differences, though. The consumer does reign supreme, more so the more capitalistic you are, obviously, because, in Venezuela, you go and get whatever food you can get. In the United States of America or Canada, you go in there and say, oh, there's 9 different versions of fake milk. There's
toilet paper could be a little bit tighter.
It has been in the last year and a half. So the point is, you have these situations where there's so much different variety that the consumer does make its choice. In the European Union model you just said, that's not consumer choice.
That's ideologically driven.
That's ideologically and politically driven, because the consumer didn't say we want to make 25% of the farms this or whatever. That was ideological and political.
It's very dangerous. I just read this week where there's an organization in Kenya pressing the Kenyan government to abolish 200 crop protection products in the country of Canada, all driven by arm twisting from the European Union. I say, how dare they?
Yeah, go and starve a bunch of Nigerians. The country that already Nigeria...
No, Kenya.
Oh, Kenya. I'm sorry. Yes, well, yeah, I'm sure that the Kenyan customer probably spends... almost half of their...
We won't get into this, but if your listeners want to follow something that's a debacle, follow what's going on in Sri Lanka.
Okay.
That is ideology taken to the max, and it's resulted in a 40% decrease in food production. And in December alone, food prices rose 22% in December alone.
Okay. Now, you also pointed out something that the issue in poor Kenya is that the average consumer there, the poor woman with a couple of kids to feed, probably spends 40 to 50% of her income on groceries, whereas it's 6 or 7% here in the United States. And yet the Europeans, mostly, like you said, European Union and political forces, went there and decided we're going to tell them what's best for these people and make their food even more expensive. So anyway, let's back to the consumer thing. You mentioned a gal that got presented this, and this is how we're going to close it out. Something that gave you hope. And I don't like to use the word hope. It's a little bit touchy. It's a little bit undefinable. You got hope. You got some positive out of a gal that got up and presented, because she said you thought it was going to be...
I thought it was going to be another person dumping on agriculture. But she actually said, I'm waiting for the day when the consumer wakes up and understands that a genetically modified wheat that can resist drought is actually better for climate change than anything else. She said, I'm waiting for that day to happen. So holy cow, did I ever turn on? Because of course in Argentina right now, Bioceres has just released a drought-tolerant, saline-tolerant, genetically engineered wheat, which is exactly what we need.
Yep.
I don't think that we can get through adopting or adapting to climate change in agriculture unless we move to geo-food. And what I mean by that is genetically engineered organic food production, which means using genetic engineering to reduce our inputs. That's the direction I think we need to go.
And it's really interesting because the poor Whole Foods customer is going to be in such a quandary. It's genetically engineered food, but it was done so to be organic, so we didn't have to use herbicides and pesticides.
Won't that mess them up?
That gave you hope at the Visions Conference when you actually thought you thought you perceived a degree of understanding.
Well, I think what's happening is slowly the consumer is starting to get educated and being more concerned about where their food is coming from. COVID has helped that because they're cooking more at home.
And they got a little scared. They saw a few empty shelves.
Exactly. And they're starting to ask questions. And when you start to ask questions about where food is produced and stuff like that, you start to understand the farming operations today are pretty damn good at what they're doing. It's not as bad as what PETA would have you watch on TV.
So you left with some hope on that, because this gal did not come from the Farm Bureau, which is still out here saying the usual about tell your story. She came from a different perspective.
How Good was the name of the organization, and they're doing the sustainability index for a whole bunch of restaurants and stuff like that. And her name was Christina. I'm trying to remember her last name, can't. But how good was the site? And I thought that was worthwhile having a look at.
Exciting time to be in the business of agriculture. His name is Rob Saik. He is the CEO and founder of AgVisorPro, and they would like you to know that AgVisorPro connects agriculture to its experts. If you want to learn more about his company or Rob Saik, you can find your company at
AgVisorPro, and the real simple way to do this is simply go to your iOS or your Android device and download AgVisor with an O, AgVisorPro, and download it, and instantaneously you can be talking to plant experts, crop experts, livestock experts, equipment experts, or business experts on AgVisorPro, and really excited to bring this brand new connectivity platform into our sector.
We said it's kind of like the Uber for agricultural information.
Uber for brains.
Uber for brains in agriculture.
Like eHarmony for agriculture. We match seekers to experts.
Find the person that can help you and do it instantaneously. Also, if you want to keep up with Rob, he's got some pretty smart stuff, and he and I have been friends for a while. Like I said, he wrote a book, and I put a testimonial together for that, and then he put a testimonial together for my book, Food Fear.
Food Fear.
Don't
fear your food.
We can be linked to each other through all the social media stuff, but you can find him on all the social media. It's SAIKROB, Rob or Robert, SAIK.
Syke at Twitter.
Syke at Twitter, and you know what? I encourage you to look him up. Until next time, also, while you're looking up stuff, check out the great work I'm doing over there for Extreme Ag. That's XTREME.
Hey, listeners, can I tell you about my Damian Mason impression? That's not too bad, is it? It's a great show, Damian.
I don't know if any of these people actually agree that's a great impression. Check out extremeag.farm for some of the other great work I'm putting together for farming operations that want to up their game by seeing some of the new trials, experiments, and mistakes that the guys from Extreme Ag are making. So check that all out. Check out AgVisorPro.com. Check out any past episodes. We're up to like 230 of these, and share them with your friends. All right. Thanks for being here, Mr. R. Syke.
Farm on, people.
All right. Till next time, it's the Business of Agriculture.
This episode of The Business of Agriculture was brought to you by Land Trust. Landowners, just like you, are increasing profitability by adding recreation to their portfolio of land use. Millions of recreators actively seek wide open spaces for birdwatching, photography, hunting, fishing, horseback riding, and many other farm and ranch activities. Owners of farm and ranch properties are partnering with Recreation Access Network Land Trust. Land Trust is an online platform connecting recreators with landowners for outdoor experiences on their land to increase profitability. Visit landtrust.com/BOA, as in Business of Agriculture, to learn more. That's landtrust.com/BOA.